The following is a proposal for an action research study with the goal of increasing student engagement in independent reading. But first, consider this. Not everyone will agree what the legacy of LeBron James should be, whether he is the greatest of all time or just one of the greatest of all time. But regardless, he is one of the best basketball players playing the game right now. Now, how did LeBron James reach this point? Did he do it by memorizing and learning every sort of play that you could have in basketball? Did he do it by reading lots of books about basketball? Did he do it by becoming fluent in all of the defensive and offensive strategies you can use in basketball? Did he do it by learning what good basketball players do versus what bad basketball players do? Did he do it by watching lots of film? Those are all important and all pieces of what could make him a great player. But the only thing that's going to make him the player that he is by practicing and playing basketball. You don't get better at basketball if you don't play it. The same logic applies to reading. You can learn all the reading comprehension strategies available. You can learn about genres. You can learn about text structure. You can learn what good readers and bad readers do. You can look at any sort of strategy that's going to help you understand what you read. But the thing that's going to make you better is reading. The way to get better at reading is to read. Because with reading, you get more exposure, you get more prior knowledge, you get more practice, and all those things combined make someone a good reader. Good readers have all these strategies and things that they have in place, but the biggest thing that they have is that they've read a lot. And that's something that I want to help increase so that I can then in turn increase performance in reading. Because currently, looking at the current scores in my district, it kind of seems like my district's in a race to the bottom. And in order to help counteract that, we've got to get kids reading. Because if kids aren't reading, then they're not going to get better at reading, no matter what kind of new curriculums or strategies or instructional tools that we implement. All those are going to be for naught if the kids aren't reading. So, with that in mind, this action research is basically centered around 6 strategies that were derived from the literature review. So during the literature review, I noticed 6 strategies that I felt that were going to be really effective at increasing engagement in independent reading, as well as maybe just some other general things to consider when it comes to independent reading. So the first strategy that I came across was the teacher-created reading culture strategy. And this was found in an article by Moser and Morrison. And basically what happened in this study is that a cohort of 26 fourth grade students were given these pieces. So they were, as part of their instructional lesson planning, were given time for silent reading. They were offered a choice of reading materials. They had literature read to them and with their teacher. And the teacher was an adult model of reading, meaning the teacher talked about reading. The teacher read in front of them. The teacher talked about books that were interesting to them. In other words, created that reading culture. So that was the first strategy. In this program, they noticed that, there were some great gains on comprehension tests, on the number of books read by students. This was especially effective in increasing the reading done by the male students because the teacher was male. So a lot of success done with increasing kids' independent reading with that reading culture. So kind of one of the first strategies is that reading culture of having kids read, but also having that strong reading model. The second strategy that was found was a more kind of community family-based approach. So in this study, families were given this plan for the TV Tune-Out Tuesdays, which really nowadays you'd have to make it kind of like no device day. But basically there was a night each week that they wouldn't watch TV and that they would do literacy families together. There were also a lot of motivational things done in class. They did author studies, they did read alouds, they did book talks. And this was done with kindergarten and 6th grade students, so a large range of students. And the goal was for them to be unplugged and to really engage in independent reading. So there was some success. The engagement was kind of negligible, but they definitely saw some more positive trends in terms of kids wanting to read or desiring to read. So there was some success with this kind of strategy. But again, this is kind of that family-led, community-based strategy. So the third strategy is a technology-based program. So in the article that I read, they were talking about a program called the Read to Impress program, where kids engage in side-by-side read-alouds with the tutor, where the tutor reads a little bit faster than the student and the student reads behind them. And then just repeated readings, really focusing on fluency. So my district doesn't have that, but something that we do have is Achieve 3000. So that is a technology-based reading program. So I want to see if maybe implementing that, if a classroom is really truly using Achieve 3000 the way that it's meant to be used, is that going to increase students in engagement in reading, maybe by increasing their confidence in their abilities. So the fourth strategy is the enrichment model. A lot of plans to increase independent reading are focused on the deficits because typically these are the kids that struggle in reading. And so they're very remedial minded. This strategy, though, took the opposite approach. They took the kind of teaching that's normally reserved for kids who are higher achieving and created a program where there was an interest and learning style assessment given to the students. The curriculum eliminated everything that should have already been mastered and focused just on new information. And the students were given that time to really pursue things that they wanted to do independently. It's called the SEM-R model, which is what the enrichment model was. So this was done with third graders, fourth graders, and fifth graders. And they had a control group in this study as well. And they noticed that there weren't any significant differences in terms of the reading engagement. But the one thing that did stand out is that there weren't any losses either in reading comprehension gains. So it illustrated that perhaps you don't need to focus on the remediation so much because you're not going to lose anything if you don't go over the things that the kids should have already known. So just seeing if maybe a more enrichment style, so providing kids with maybe a level of teaching or a type of teaching they're not typically given, if that kind of novelty could help increase the engagement and student achievement. The fifth strategy is the reading accountability measure. So this was done in a college class where students weren't doing the required readings for their class programs. So what the professors did is they helped devise some ways to get kids to do the reading, because you need, in college especially, hopefully, if it's a well-designed class, you have to do the reading in order to be successful in the class. So what they did is they created two measures. There was one, it was the Monte Carlo quiz, which was basically the teacher rolled a dice, and if it got a certain number, they had to take the quiz, and if they didn't get that, didn't roll that number, they didn't have to take the quiz. And then also reading guides. The reading guides were focused on increasing those metacognitive strategies and helping students kind of think about their reading before they come to class. So the Monte Carlo was great because the students never knew for sure if they were going to have to take a quiz or not, and if the quiz counted for enough points. That kind of helps create some extrinsic motivation for reading. And then the metacognitive strategies and in the reading guides help maybe take away some of the barriers to reading outside of class that kids may encounter. So this is kind of the accountability measure strategy, where through quizzes or pre-reading guides that students are pushed to engage more in their reading. And in this study, it was seen that the reader's guide helped increase, the likelihood that kids were thinking about their reading before they read, but the quiz and the reader's guide both helped increase compliance. The final strategy comes from this article by Hall, Hendrick, and Williams, and it was focused on employing music and allowing kids to kind of talk about the reading to help increase the independent reading done. So students were able to listen to an iPod shuffle with classical music while they read. They were also given time to talk about what they were reading. And they were also given that choice, which is also, typically in research a proven strategy for increasing engagement. So in this study, it did help increase the engagement in independent reading, and also kind of some of the metacognitive strategies where some of the students were able to monitor their own learning. While the study noted that some students found the music to be distracting, so they didn't use it. So it was kind of nice to see also that students were, applying a little more self-assessment as they read and as they engaged in things. So that was the final strategy. So this is kind of like an auditory enhance, where kids are bringing in music, so maybe having the option to listen to soft music while they read, to talk about the reading. So a lot of that auditory-based learning kind of strategies. Some general observations that were found in another article that didn't really have a strategy was that when they had self-selection, you need to have a strategy alongside it, because there was a study where they tried to see if just giving kids choice was going to do anything. And there wasn't really any prominent gains in that study, but they did note that if you're going to use self-selection, that should be a piece, not the whole strategy. Another one is that students should be constructing their learning, should be active in that, not just the passive. So this is kind of like that lecture versus, more like problem-based learning kind of divide in education, so that students should be constructing their learning, kind of that constructivist Vygotsky's kind of model of learning. So students should be constructing their learning. Another one is that round robin should be avoided, and there are other reading strategies that can help engage kids in reading, where strategies like round robin typically disincentivize reading and make it not something that's desired by students. And then lastly, in this kind of last article, which was a compilation of different strategies and perspectives that may have helped increase independent reading, is that basically you need to have adult supports. You need an adult model or an adult structuring it. There needs to be embedded instruction, so it needs to be part of what they do every day, and it needs to be student focused. So that choice piece. So the methodology for the study is the Lewin Action Research Spiral. And this one was chosen because I felt that it was a comprehensive kind of framework for action research. It has all the different pieces to help me kind of think through what I was doing. And with that, I chose the pre-experimental design. This was chosen because, let me find. So it's a very primitive kind of experimental design, and it's kind of a one-shot case study, so not maybe a long-term research. And I felt that with my experience level and with the fact that many of the variables I can't account for, I felt that I wasn't doing a true experiment, but the pre-experimental design, where I was doing a lot of the parts of an experimental design, but not with the the consistency and the controlling of the variables, and with the experience, I think. So that was why I chose those two things. And then the sampling, it's a non-probability convenient sample. I wanted to make sure that each class was similar. So the TAM classes, which are going to have kids with special needs, which are going to be bringing some intricacies into the data. All the TAM teachers only have one class where they don't have any students with special needs. So that limited the classes that could be done for that. And then I tried to pair that with the other teachers who do the honors courses. So I didn't choose the honors classes. So I picked a gen ed class from the teacher who does the honors courses. And then I picked a non-spec ed class from the teachers who do TAM classes. And that was just because of what was available to me. There wasn't any probability. It was just me selecting based on, I want a consistent class composition, so I'm going to pick these because this is what's available to me. The instruments used in this are the Reading Engagement Index and the Final Observation Instrument. Both are observational tools where the teacher is going to be rating the behaviors that are associated with independent reading. So the first one, the Reading Engagement Index, is going to be done at the beginning and the end of the study. And this one is more like the whole scale behaviors related to reading. So how often they read, all the different kind of things with that. And so that's going to be something done at the beginning and the end. So kind of like a pre and post assessment, but it's not a test. It's an observational tool that the teachers are using just based on like whole scale reading behaviors. And then the Final Observation Instrument was actually a research article where these researchers were taking the time to design a observational tool that was reliable and that was consistent and that could really observe the specific behaviors related with independent reading. So this one is a more kind of a day-to-day thing that'll be used to just, during this class period, what were the behaviors that I saw from the kids? And these are behaviors that are specifically for independent reading, such as like, was the book oriented in a way that's useful for reading? Things like that. And then the results of this study are obviously to be determined, and that will let me know based on the kind of the consistency of behaviors for independent reading and the growth seen by the different classes, and whether there was any increase in the amount of behaviors that were seen, is going to determine which strategy, or if all the strategies, or if none of the strategies were successful at increasing independent reading ability. and the